You're listening to the Gender Reveal Party podcast. I'm your host, Jay Pryor. This isn't your usual gender reveal party. There will be no baby sex parts. This is the real reveal, where we reveal gender through stories of brave humans willing to share their lived experience. Enjoy the listening. I sure enjoy making it. Hi, and welcome back to the Gender Reveal Party. I'm Jay Pryor, your host, and I'm so happy to be today with my friend, Debi Jackson. Hey, Debi, welcome.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, it's so exciting to have you. Thanks so much for saying yes. I know how busy you are. You're a very, very, very busy person, and so I just appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. So, the very first time that I ever heard about you, do you
Mhm.
remember? Because you got famous from a YouTube video, right? Initially,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
what year
yeah.
was that?
I don't like the word famous, but no, I think it was 2014.
Was
Yeah,
it 2014?
2014.
Wow.
Um, I took part in a project called the Listen to Your Mother Show, which was not just mothers, parents, giving some very short speeches about parenting and some different experiences. And I said yes to it, thinking the most I had seen from other people were a couple of hundred, maybe a couple thousand views. It was a pretty small production. And thought no one's searching for information about parents talking about trans kids, so I can do this. It's safe. And then, yeah, it blew up and started getting spread around LGBTQ media. And suddenly there's hundreds of thousands of views and everyone's talking about it.
Yeah, and so is that different than didn't you have a speech that you addressed your congregation or your church at some point? Was that a different thing?
No, a lot of people think that's the same thing because that event was held in a Universalist Unitarian church, I think. So you're up in front of a pulpit. There's, the big stage. A lot of people also think that it was like addressing Congress or something. So
That's
there
funny.
are lots of interpretations of what it was. I had already been doing a little bit of kind of that local activism here, but that was the first time I did anything public. And yeah, it was in front of a very friendly group.
Got it. Got it. But part of your story though is you did end up leaving your church, right? When your kid came out. Is that right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I grew up as Southern Baptist and was one of those people who was at church 3, 4 times a week at the very least. In high school, I was actually my high school student body chaplain in Alabama. Not many schools have student body chaplains, but in the South you do.
Hmm.
So my junior and senior year of school, I would get on the PA system every morning and read a devotional and lead the school in prayer.
Wow.
And yeah, the year that Avery told us that they're not a boy, I actually think was the same year, or it was either that or 1 or 2 years later, the Southern Baptist Conference came out with their statement against gender ideology, and it was very clear that they were not moving towards progress and acceptance, but really doubling down on discrimination and bigotry.
Yeah. And so when that video came out, in my world, it got handed to me by, queer people being like, look at this mom kicking ass at this church. know?
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
I watched this video and then I'm like, crap, she's from Missouri. Like, she's like
yeah,
right next door to me. But then I
yeah.
didn't meet you until that day that we met those police officers in Missouri, right? And
Mhm.
I think that's the first time we ever met, right?
I think so. I
I
was
think
trying to
so.
think back. We've run into each other a couple different times. The KNEA
Hmm. And we presented
events,
together then.
and yeah, so it's weird once you get to know someone, you know them online, you've been connected, you see their work, you just feel like you've been besties forever.
I know,
And
right? And
that's
that's
one of
how it
those
was.
things.
Well,
Yeah.
I came home that day that we did meet because in my world, then you went on to be this, activist and doing all this stuff. And, and I think that we all do this. We have our different perceptions of our own stuff. But I
Hmm.
came home that day because you said something to one of those cops, like, have you met Jay Pryor? Do you know? And I was like, of course I know Debi Jackson. And you said something like, you're not a trans activist in the Midwest and not know Jay Pryor. And I was like, did she just say that? I came home and was like, do you know what this woman said? Because you don't have a view of your own stuff. And so I was like, well, shit, cool. Debbie Jackson knows who I am. I must be the shit.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
right on.
I have the same thing because literally I'm a mom sitting at home homeschooling my kids, and I'm typing some thoughts on my laptop at my dining table. Like
Mhm.
that's my office.
Right.
So I'm not in DC or New York or San Francisco or I'm just sitting here at the dining room table, and it's the same for me. Like, how could anyone know me or think I'm anything significant? But yeah, when this is your world and you feel like there just aren't a lot of people around you look for the people, and you get to know the names, and you're like, yes, we actually do have community here, and it might be a couple hour drive between us, but you're here and you're not in New York.
Right.
So with
Yeah.
that, you're my people.
Right, exactly. And we do good work in the Midwest. I really feel like,
Yeah,
considering how conservative the areas where we live, we're doing good work. So I really appreciate the
absolutely.
work that you do. So I usually do this right off the bat, but would you go ahead and introduce yourself and share with our audience what you do and all the things?
All the things, sure.
Yeah.
um Debbie Jackson, she, her pronouns. I If you haven't seen the first speech, I shocked the world, I think, by not necessarily telling the story of supporting a trans child, but in later explaining I'm not the crazy liberal with an agenda. I am a conservative Southern Baptist Republican who comes from Alabama. And these are not the demographics that people expect to have in someone who's not just affirming their kid, but in actually jumping into activism to make a difference. Um, so my background is communications in the corporate world. Worked for major companies, telecom here in the Midwest, professional sports team here in the Midwest. And when Avery was 4, said, "You think that I'm a boy, but I'm a girl on the inside." And Avery's 14 now, so this was a decade ago. We had seen a bunch of, gender nonconforming behaviors the way I mean that is clearly just society has norms they expect out of kids, and Avery wasn't matching all of those norms with interest in play and toys and things. And we thought at first, oh, maybe we have a gay son. My best friend in Alabama in high school and beyond is gay. My husband's best friend in college is gay. Like, we knew gay men, and we thought, oh, okay, they always said they knew when they were young and we're a little bit more feminine. Maybe that's what's going on here. Until Avery said, "I'm not a boy, I'm a girl. Don't you know that?" And from there, we went to our pediatrician, who said, "Yeah, that doesn't sound normal. That's not imaginary play. I'm not sure what to do with that. Go see a child psychologist." And we did. We went to Children's Mercy, and they're like, "I don't know. Go see a gender therapist." And we did. And the gender therapist said, "Oh, well, all of my adult clients say they knew something was different around this age. So, okay." But even then, there were people who were thinking, can a kid actually know? Let's just double check and make sure they're not intersex. So the gender therapist sent us to an endocrinologist, and we got to the endocrinologist, and she's been our primary doctor for Avery for the last decade. And she said, as a cisgender woman, cishet woman, said, some people are just trans. Avery's just trans. Just go with it. We're not doing all these crazy tests. We don't need to do that. We don't have to turn this into a medical thing. Just go with it. And we did. So that's where we were a decade ago. And then the reason I gave the speech was after a couple of years, Avery was doing really well, and our therapist said, "Oh, you're like a success story. People need to hear about this." And we were anonymously part of a newspaper story. And then that left out a lot of the myths that I had heard people say, like, "Oh, my kid wants to be a dog." And it was just really insulting. I wanted to clear some of that up. Gave a speech, because even after, at that point, 2.5 years, we'd never met another family that had a kid that age. 2.5 years, and it was very, very isolating. We're like,
I
we're the
bet.
only ones.
Yeah.
And we're clearly not the only ones. There are
No, not at
thousands and
all.
thousands that I
Yeah.
quickly learned and
Yeah.
met after that.
Yeah, but what a trailblazer, right? I mean, at the age of 4, and then your acceptance of that
Hmm.
child at the age of 4, back then in 2014, that was huge, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, Jazz had been on 60 Minutes before that, but that was before YouTube and all the other things. So if you saw it, you saw it. And if you didn't, you didn't. And you didn't know it was there. Like I didn't
Right.
even see that interview until another year or so after my speech, when I was still searching for more families. And then it was like, oh my gosh, like they were trailblazers. How amazing was that? But I'm really proud that we were out that early, because since then you've just seen so many other parents that do TED Talks, and they talk to their local newspapers, and they're out being public and visible. And instead of having to think this is something we hide, we're the only ones, there are literally families coming out of the woodwork saying, we want to normalize this. Our kids shouldn't have to hide and not be open about this part, who fundamentally affects themselves and their character development. And of course, it's just one part of who they are. And as Avery says, not even in the top 100 things of what's most interesting about them. But at the same time, it still impacts how you engage with the world and how you connect with others and the deep insight you have. So it clearly does affect who you are and who you become. And kids shouldn't have to hide that. And that's what I and a whole lot of other parents are trying to change right now.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how grateful I am. It's amazing to me. And it gave us the bandwidth, like I had my own journey, but then
Hmm.
dealing with kids, everything I've ever done is so kids don't have to go through the crap I went through, basically. But then it came to my own kid, and by this time, my kid comes out to us in 4th grade, and we're like, we know right what to do. Like, we just already know what to do. It just, you get on
Hmm.
board for one thing. And so for any parents out there, this, I tell them this all the time. I'm sure you tell them the message is get on board, right?
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
100%.
Um, if there's fluidity, we always get the question, what if they change their minds later? Okay, so we
Yeah.
just switch pronouns again. We go get it, swap out the clothes. Like the
Right.
most important thing for them is to know that you were there and you
Right.
stood with them
No matter
and
what.
supported them no matter what.
Yeah.
And that you cared about who they were and their happiness, not trying to impose your own will of who they're supposed to be on them.
Right.
And that means letting them figure it out. Don't we all wish we didn't have such a rigid structure with our parents, and this is what you're going to study in school, and these are the friends you can hang out with, and no, you can't do that interest for whatever reason. Um, I think the most exciting thing about being a parent is seeing who your kids are going to become. It's magical.
Yeah.
Like, I, as a baby to where you are now, it's magical to see
Right.
what you go through for both of my kids, trans
Yeah.
or cis.
Right. Absolutely. And for me, it's that getting on board when people ask me that, and I've had, I was on testosterone for 18 years. I was on a
Hmm.
long time. And then when I went off testosterone, for me, I feel so good. Like I feel like I just feel so happy because I had the surgery to remove the breast, which is what for me the dysphoria was like. The breasts were the worst.
Hmm.
Having my breast removed, it was the best day of my, besides my wedding day, having my breast removed was the best day of my life.
Uh-huh.
And I love the beard, but I also love being off testosterone. I don't love the butt and the hips, but I also don't mind them, and I identify as much as a butch that I'm like, I have a butch body minus the boobs and I have a beard. I'm in pretty good shape. Like I'm
Hmm.
like pretty happy. And so I tell people all
Yeah.
the time, so what if they do change their mind? Like then they have to deal with whatever their body did. But I mean, human beings do not understand how the body goes back. I mean, my butt, I got my lady butts in charge. I mean, I'm not kidding about it. It's not, this doesn't go away. When you go off testosterone, that stuff just all comes back. It takes,
Yeah.
it took 7 years for the whole thing. And I
Hmm.
would say it took 2 for sure, almost 3 to get it all off, like out of my system.
Yeah.
But that's my
Yeah.
whole point too, is like, who cares? Just get on board. Like deal with
Right.
deal
But
with
I mean, even when it comes though, you're making a great point. So many parents have these fears of what if my kid changes their mind after they've started hormones. Um, it's not like you pop a pill and you've got, 38 Ds. It takes
right.
some time.
It takes
And
7 years.
when it takes that time as the body is changing and everything, you're still checking in with doctors about dosage. Is this going well? Are we going too fast? Do we need to slow down? Are you not developing the way you wanted? There's constant communication.
Right.
And at some point, if it starts to veer into the, oh, now this isn't quite what I wanted, you can veer right back.
Right.
And nothing is the genie making the wish, snapping the fingers, poof, puff of smoke, and then suddenly you're transformed. Like that only happens in movies.
Right.
And
Just overnight, you're like, oh, I'm a different, my whole body is just,
right.
that doesn't
So
happen. It takes a
you
while,
have
people.
time. You have time to make those adjustments. And especially now, the doctors have gotten so good at understanding microdosing and helping. Like one of my friends who sees a whole lot of kids, hundreds of trans kids, says sometimes they say no boobs but no beard. Well, how do you figure that out? Because one is with estrogen and one's with testosterone, where it comes down to the microdosing to help you, if you're non-binary, get to that place where you're feeling more comfortable. Yes, you need some hormones for your bones and your brain and whatever, but there are ways to minimize effects in either direction. Like science is so amazing right now. They're making so many strides, and science is real. I mean,
Okay, so I'm so glad you went there, because at some point it was a perfect segue. Because
okay.
first of all, Avery was pretty famous. It was it 2015 or 2017 that you were on the cover of National Geographic?
20, December of 2017 is when it came out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2017.
So we're talking cover of National Geographic, right? And this kid is famous for saying, what wasn't her quote something like the
Or,
best thing?
oh, yeah, sorry, it was 2016 because it was right at the time of the election. Yes, it's
Oh,
the January 2017 edition if anyone wants to look for it. But yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
All
go
right.
ahead.
Well, and I mean, the quote. I mean, it's like the kid's famous for this quote that's something like the best thing about being a girl is not having to try to be a boy.
Yeah,
Something like
pretend.
that.
It's
Pretend, not
pretend.
having
It's
to
the best.
pretend to be a boy.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right. And so, cover of National Geographic, famous quote, don't have to pretend to be a boy. And now, right, haven't we moved on this a little?
Yeah, just in the last 2 months or so, and it's not something that we've really been out because I haven't been out doing lots of interviews and things. So there hasn't been a big pronouncement to the world, but for a decade it's been very consistent. I'm a girl. I'm a girl. I'm a girl. I'm a girl. Can't wait to move on with my life and all of those kinds of things. And now it's a well. I don't really know if I'm like a girl in the sense that a lot of people are. I'm feeling like I'm more non-binary. And instead of having that M or that F on my birth certificate and ID, is there a way to have an X right now? Because I don't really feel like um, either of those letters makes sense to me. I'm just looking for something in between. So yeah, we're continuing a new part. If people have noticed subtly in the couple of times I've already said something, I tried to say Avery and then said they, because we've moved to they them pronouns. And a lot in my advocacy, a lot I have continued to say she over the last couple of months, because I ask my child's permission every time I do any kind of advocacy. We had the conversation this morning before recording. What do you want me to say? And a month or so ago, they were still like, "Well, I'm just trying those pronouns right now. Like, if you go out and just say that I've switched, and then I decide in another year that it's she/her, then all of the transphobes out there are going to say, 'See, this kid's confused, and the mom doesn't even know.'"
Right.
And I was like, "No, you actually help in advocacy, because what we've always said is, especially as a parent, we can't predict where our kid's going to go. We can't predict if they're going to want surgery. We can't predict how they're going to live when they're 30. And we shouldn't try to, because it's not our lives and it's certainly not our bodies.
Right.
So, as you know, there's fluidity. And a lot of times you think you have to jump from one box to the other because that's all that you know is available to you. And then later you can come back and say, nah, I'm good without either of those, or I'm kind of like half and half. And yeah, Avery's definitely like, I'm not a man, I'm not a boy. I have no interest in the beard. I have no interest in the Adam's apple. I have no interest in my voice dropping at all. But that doesn't mean I'm super femme. And we have the question this morning. So would you describe yourself as femme non-binary? Is that what you want me to say when I'm talking to Jay? And they're like, no, like, I don't even know if I need that description. Just non-binary is good.
Yeah.
So that's where we are.
And thank you for sharing that. This is the real reveal where we actually reveal gender. So that's kind of cool. So thanks for doing that on our podcast. That's pretty neat. And it brings up a question for me, because I have a similar situation with my kiddo in 4th grade came out, and boy, it was all, I'm a boy. Like, I am 100% male. I want male pronouns. And now his gender expression was always very feminine. So he's a boy that likes to wear a dress. Great, no problem, whatever. That's all good. But now, a year and a half later, now that we're in middle school, it's more like, well, I'm feeling more non-binary. And I think Avery is saying, is all the gender roles are stupid anyway.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
They are stupid anyway. Right?
They are.
I mean, so, but with this kid, and here's where, you could probably help me with the medical stuff a little bit. We are so blessed. First of all, we use gender pathways at Children's Mercy. So to want to give them some props, because wow, are we blessed to have that, organization here in the Midwest. But so my kid's on hormone blockers currently, wants to go off. First of all, wants to go off the hormone blockers because they haven't grown since like last February. So then we started on this other, and this is where I get botched, because I'm like, I'm not going to be the one to remember the names of these drugs or whatever. But so but now they want to go off the hormone blockers, but are concerned, right? So there's a concern, because then the secondary sex characteristics that kick in, just like Avery doesn't want the deep voice. My kid's concerned about the boobs. Like, I'm not sure I want the boobs, but I'm also more non-binary, so I don't know. So how do we navigate that for non-binary kids? You just said, and I was blown away, because I was like, how do you do that? How do you get the no tits and not the beard, or how do you manage all that? And it sounds like they're figuring that out, and that's exciting.
Yeah, they're figuring it out. And yes, props to Children's Pathway and the doctor that I mentioned that told us at the age of 4 to just go ahead and support Avery was Dr. Jacobson, who has still been the person that we have looked to for advice for the last decade. So she does amazing things. The microdosing is has come so far, and it is because like when we started down the path of hormones, Dr. Jacobson had known Avery for so long and said, but I still want to give you time. It should be like a normal puberty. You progress really, really, really slowly. And Dr. Jacobson is a fan of height, because, I'm pretty short, not quite scraping the 5-foot mark there. And Dr. Jacobson's, overall, later in life with your health, with weight and cardiovascular issues and other things, that it can help to just have those few extra inches. So she's very concerned with trying to maximize height for down the road. But it was always the same thing. Every appointment, are boobs more important to you, or is being taller more important to you? Because the more estrogen you have, the faster those growth plates are going to fuse. You'll end up shorter, but you'll definitely see that breast growth. And then I think it would be the same in reverse. Like, if you need to grow, Avery did grow on blockers, but wasn't on blockers for too long before starting some HRT. So yeah, you can maybe start by microdosing tiny bits of testosterone, because the estrogen would allow um would start fusing the growth plates. Not going to see a lot of height or anything, but if it's done so subtly and slowly, maybe the beard and things don't start coming in. But I'm not an endocrinologist, and I'm not here to pretend to be one. I just know that that's one of those things that maybe rather than checking in every 6 months, it would be a checking in every 3 months. How you doing? How are you feeling? Are you starting to see any of those secondary characteristics? Do we need to slow it down a little bit? Um, because they're seeing more and more non-binary people coming to the clinics
Oh my
at
God.
that age, not having to figure it out at 20 or 30,
Right.
but at puberty saying, I'm non-binary and I don't want to develop any of these ways.
Or
And they're,
before puberty, well before puberty. I mean, I've got a
well,
neighborhood
right.
full of kids that are. I just had our neighborhood kid come over here wearing his non-binary flag the other
Nice.
day. Oh, my heart just burst open because he came over just to show us, right, that he'd just come out as non-binary and he got a flag and he was super
Hmm.
excited, and and his family's on board. And I mean, I've known this kid since he was 2, and it
Yeah.
was obvious that he wasn't on the binary of the
Yeah.
masculine perspective. So I knew something was going on there, but it was great that he can come over and, just get validated in his neighborhood. And it was like he's in 3rd grade, 4th grade, something. I mean,
Yeah.
so I think
Yeah.
well before puberty, these kids are figuring this out, which is
Right,
exciting.
right. But then that question comes, the stress for the parents is, I don't understand, because I was taught the basic biology. You have two
Right.
options with hormones.
Yep.
And that's what I mean. Like, doctors are seeing kids are being affirmed, and they've got to figure out how to help manage that too, because their job is not to cause further stress, saying you
Right.
have to pick one.
Sure.
And they're doing a really good job with it.
Yeah, I think so too. And I get a ton of calls from parents all the time. Every time I speak, I've spoken
Hmm.
at 2 Rotaries the last month or so, and I tell them because usually at Rotary they're a little older folks. So I'm always telling
Uh-huh.
them, your grandkids are coming out. They're going to want you to use they them pronouns. They're going to come out. Your grandkids or your great nieces and nephews or whoever it is in your life, you're going to deal with this. Like, it's coming to you. And so
Yeah.
you could just like, resist it and go in fighting, or you could get on board and start practicing, and then you'll be ready. And so
Hmm.
it really inspires me when I have somebody who is a senior person, over 70, and they're on board, with they them pronouns and really learning it. And because I get that it's not something we were taught, any of
Yeah.
us. And then it takes something to code switch into that in the beginning. Now you and I are, it's what I want to share with people is, once you do this for a while, it just becomes easy, right? Don't you think?
Hmm.
Like, if came to you and told you I switch pronouns, you'd probably switch on a dime, right? Because it's so easy.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's definitely easier if you practice. And we practice all the time. My kids for the last 2 or 3 years have said, "Oh, look at that bird. Why is he sitting over there by himself instead of being over with the flock on that wire?" And they're like, "Did you just gender that bird? We don't know the bird's gender. That's they." Like, they have been talking about non-gendering things and
Yes.
objects for the longest time.
Yeah.
And in my car we have this little unicorn. It's pink, it's sparkly, it's fabulous, it's rainbow. But the tag on it, I think it's made by a company called Douglas, so we call it Douglas, but the gender presentation is very much over the top, like drag queen or something. So Douglas is clearly non-binary, and we talk about Douglas with they them pronouns, and that has helped practice a lot too. And if you just find ways to incorporate it into your life, it's so much easier. It feels very natural. And, I've gotten to the point where I just default to saying they about any person until I've been expressly told what their pronouns are, or we've had that conversation about gender.
Yep.
And if you just kind of start with that as the default, it becomes much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It just becomes a muscle.
Mhm.
And I always tell people I think it's just a neural pattern that they haven't ever used before. It's like learning
Mhm.
anything. You just have to start using it and you get used to it. And I've had my siblings, I'm the youngest of 9, and there's 7 of us living. and the two that are closest to me live here close by, and they're
Hmm.
on board. I don't see the rest of them that much, and I don't make a big thing out of it that in terms of he they, because either one really is okay with me.
Hmm.
But man, my siblings have practiced and learned it and figured it out. I mean, people do it, so it's not that hard. It's just a matter of
Yeah.
it's more about a willingness. Like you have to be willing. Um,
Yeah.
and I hope, did you get a chance to see my show? I don't know if you'd seen it or not.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and in my show, I had this woman who was like, I think 76 after seeing my show, and she came to me a week later and said, I have never known how gendered everything is, like all the time.
Hmm.
And after seeing your
Hmm.
show, I kind of woke her up for like a week. I think people go
Yeah.
back to being unconscious, but I woke her up for like a week. And that's
Hmm.
my whole goal, is just to wake people up in the show.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you do a great job. And I love the way that you describe your gender at different points. Like you tell the story and they're like, gender is,
Hmm.
what is it? Perfectly trained female
Classically
and,
trained
or
female.
classically.
Yeah.
I keep saying perfectly, but yeah,
Perfectly is pretty
classically
much what the way
trained.
they told us to be.
That's why it's in my head. You
And you
have to
grew
be
up in
this.
Alabama, so I would even like put a
Yeah.
put a pin on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, everything around us is gendered. And that's why when I speak to people too, I try to explain to them, the differences between your gender identity, gender expression, gender roles, because we have gendered everything that's around us, not just colors and toys with blues and pink and dolls versus trucks, but literally if you say the word doctor and nurse, people think man and woman in that order
Absolutely.
because we've gendered those roles, even though now it's very clearly switched and everything else. Um, but we have these ideas with associated with certain words about who is supposed to have that role, how you're supposed to act and behave is the way that you sit, where you're either man spreading or you have your ankle on your knee, or your knee to knee, and ankles tucked and all of that, to the way we walk, and the way that you hold your head when you laugh, like everything we have decided is either feminine or masculine. And when you step outside those norms, or that isn't natural to you, that's when you look different enough that people their inherent homophobia comes in. And then homophobia is at the root of transphobia, because then trans people are like, oh my God, you're breaking so many rules at once. I can't even handle it. Like all the homophobic stuff is coming to the surface with me. Um, and it's ridiculous because you can watch so many people. Like I'm from the South, and the more that I've watched NASCAR after being out of the South, the more I realize there are a whole bunch of Southern men that are NASCAR racers. When they talk, they sound very effeminate, and someone up here might look at them and think, "Oh, that's a gay man," because of the way he's talking. But it's just the way his Southern expression comes out,
Mhm.
and he's a manly NASCAR driver. But
Right.
when I was in that was my norm. So I didn't see it that way. And now that I live in a place that even polices accents and the way that you speak more, when I look at them now, I'm like, oh, is he a gay man? No, he's just a Southern guy. Why am I letting myself go there the way that everyone around me does?
Right.
And it's crazy once you start with that awareness. Um, I haven't been able to stop noticing, but maybe that's because I'm deeply
You
ingrained
live it.
and constantly living the work. And I wish more people like that woman could just open their eyes and live with that awareness.
Yeah, me too. And that's part of the gender reveal party and the real reveal. I mean, doing this for me, this has just been joyful because I just get to talk to my friends. I'm
Hmm.
hoping that by putting it out as a podcast, we actually start waking people up a little bit more. I've had
Hmm.
cis het people already, and I think we've got 8 episodes released at this point. I've had them already telling me this is making me question my own gender expression and my own and I'm like, thank you. That's what I want, because I feel like I feel so blessed that I'm a queer because I get to explore in this
Hmm.
world where, I think people who live in the binary and are trained in the binary, they just don't even question it. It's just something they don't even, and so they don't have the freedom that goes with it when we get to realize, oh, this gender stuff is, I get to do what I want. I'm going to do what I want. Like
Yeah.
it's such a freedom to be able to do that.
Yeah, I definitely have seen a lot of people that start questioning their gender afterwards. I think it's fascinating that you've had a child who's come out after you've been out, because I also see it in reverse. The child comes out and then the parents like, oh, that's what I've been feeling and struggling with for the last 35, 40, 45 years. Now I get it. And then they'll transition too. But I've also seen a lot of other parents who start saying, oh, maybe I would be more non-binary now if I was growing up today rather than when I was. And we have always joked in my house that I'm the husband and my husband is more of the wife. And that's only because like I'm the super logical one. At the end of the day, I'm done. I don't want to have conversations about what happened today and how I'm feeling. Whereas my husband is super emotional. He cried at our wedding and I was like hitting him with my elbow, like, come on, dude, toughen up. Just a wedding. And he cried when the kids were born. And I'm like, but I'm the one who just did all this work. Come on now. And, you know, like in our house, like the gender roles are backwards, and a lot of people laugh at him and have teased him about that for a long time. And I admit I've even teased him, and I feel really bad now. Even, you know, we talk about everything's gendered. He likes his double shot vanilla latte, and I'm like, dude, just kind of like black with a little bit of cream. Like, you got such a girly drink. Like, and we do that, right? And we all have those habits and judgments to break. But now my point is, like, we've definitely had different gender roles in our home. So then when we had a child come out, we're like, okay, break the gender roles. You don't have to live this way. And I have always expressed myself differently. I'm thinking back to high school. Like, I would go to the thrift store and my clothes, my favorite jacket was a man's blazer that I wore as an outer layer of a coat. And I cut my hair really short. I never really put on jewelry, didn't really do much with makeup, never did my nails or anything until Avery came out. And Avery was like, you're not very girly, mom. Like, you could step it up a little bit. And because Avery still had really short hair at the time, I was like, cut the hair even shorter. Maybe we'll do our nails together and it'll look like a mommy daughter who has this kind of gender expression. No one will question, is that a boy or a girl anymore, for them when they were out in public. So I kind of evolved that in the speech that I gave. I'm in a pink dress. It's the first pink I've ever owned in my life. And it was desperate because I did not want a pink dress. I didn't even have dresses, but I knew I was supposed to dress up. So I went shopping. And again, being under 5 feet tall, unless I shop in the kids section, that was like the only thing I could find. But now people see me as like this super feminine person, and I'm not. Like, I have never called myself a woman. Like, I don't like the term.
Yeah.
And that's when I've had the conversations with Avery lately is it that you don't like what woman means in our society? Because I completely rejected that. As a Southern Baptist, I'm supposed to defer to my husband, and there's certain things I'm supposed to do, and I'm supposed to act a certain way. And I will not be that person. Right. So is it me objecting to patriarchy and to that inherent, like, you're a woman, you need to know your place attitude that I was brought up with? Is that why I don't like being called a woman? Or is it really in going back and examining my life because that's not who I am?
Right.
And I don't know. I'm still figuring that stuff out. I would have no problem being called they. I'm pretty sure I don't really want to be called he.
Right.
I don't, like, I've got a lot of masculine traits. I'm not a dude. I'm not a guy. Yeah. But where am I over on this other side of the spectrum? And I think that's, if we were honest, more people would be in the middle of the road, both with gender identity and sexual orientation. Like, we've been trained to hide those parts of ourselves. Yeah, and I love that this generation is totally like, I'm gender fluid and pansexual, right? Because I don't care. I love the person. And I think that's this generation is going to change everything.
I agree. And I can't wait to be like 90 and have that just be the norm, for kids coming up, that'll
Yeah,
just be the norm, I think. I hope so anyway.
I do
Um,
too.
yeah. And I love that you said all that. I was just talking to Jessica about this, and I said this the other day on one of the podcasts that to me, gender is like art. And it's
Hmm.
like, I can look at a piece of art and I can think, what in the actual F? What the? Really? I mean, that's when I get in my redneck Midwestern roots. I'm like, really? You just
That's
splattered a
art.
bunch of paint on a canvas? What? But then somebody else behind me can come back up and be like, wow, look at that beautiful masterpiece of that whatever garden. And I'm like, okay. Gender's like that. For me, I think gender is so nuanced and so personal that it's
Mhm.
just an expression. And when people can really get that, then and have the freedom to be completely expressed, it's different. And but when I was coming up, it's like I'm similarly, I'm going back and looking at things like, for me, part of the hatred of being female or being a woman was about the sexual attention I got from adult men. Like I
Mhm.
hated that. it
Yeah.
intimidated me. It made me feel scared and weird and gross. And and then I was into, I'm a lesbian in terms of that. So I wasn't attracted to boys in that way. I mean, I had good friends and I would make out with my boyfriend and stuff, but when it came really to that, it was that wasn't, it didn't feel natural to me. It didn't feel normal to me. So was part of my gender stuff about that, right? So,
Mhm.
I'm constantly in that world. I mean, like I say I feel more lesbian than I ever have, but I never used that word either. Like I wasn't ever a lesbian. I was a dyke, right? And I was a
Mhm.
butch dyke, and that felt right to me. As soon as that, I was like, oh wow, this is who I am, and it was brilliant. I don't feel as much like now. I feel more like a genderqueer lesbian person. So I don't know. It's crazy. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just the other day, I heard that there is a distinction between. I was looking at they had the flags out at one of the striped cow or something that I was at, and they
Mhm.
had a genderqueer flag and a non-binary flag, and then that threw me completely off. I'm like, oh, for crying out loud! Now I have another thing I got to learn about because I have always identified as genderqueer because I just felt
Mhm.
like that's the most accurate that I could come up with. But then when non-binary came out, I was like, well, that's it. That's the same thing. And now I'm like, I, I don't know.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a genderqueer and a non-binary human? Do you know?
I don't know, and I think, well, you would have to tell me because I don't apply those terms or labels to myself. I've What I've learned is that queer is a word that expresses both being outside the norms of sexuality and gender. Because so many of the words, it might be the way that you're saying butch dyke, like that's an identity too, and presentation. So that is kind of gender expression tied in with attraction. um
It's
and I
true.
think
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah. I
that's
like that. Yeah,
non-binary doesn't say anything about who you might be attracted to, but the
yeah,
queer and the way that that has been brought back into the
yeah.
language,
Thanks for
it's
that
just like
clarification.
I'm somewhere swinging over here on the spectrum, and it might be
Right.
a little, from day to day, be a little different. And
Yeah,
that's what I think of as that
yeah.
word.
Got it. Well, and I love the word queer. Queer has always been a word that I've embraced from day one, as soon as I came out
Hmm.
when I was 18. And it's
Hmm.
always a controversial word for some people, anyway. But I love that, and that makes a lot of sense to me actually. So genderqueer is where I am and always have been. So that really that I like that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I was talking to Aurora Higgs, who is my mentor. I don't know if you saw her. She was uh, podcast number 3,
Hmm.
but she is, I think everybody should have a 30-year-old mentor. Like, I do. And so she helps me with a lot of that stuff. And we
Hmm.
were talking the other day about how, we really want to honor the people who who can, and who are out right now as non-binary, especially because I walked in the world as what would be considered non-binary. Um, and that's the hardest place to live, right?
Yeah.
Because as long as I look like as long as I look like I'm in the binary, right, it's a lot safer for me.
Hmm.
So, Aurora looks all woman. I look like a dude, regardless of, you know, that I've been off testosterone now, I look like a guy, and so I continue to get that privilege. I'm way more
Hmm.
conscious of the privilege now that testosterone is gone. I'm convinced that testosterone has some little something in it that zaps you of your consciousness.
You've just solved
That's
the
my
question
theory
we've
on men.
all had about men.
I'm convinced of it. I am convinced because now that I'm off testosterone, I'm way more conscious of the privilege that I mean, I just see it everywhere a lot more
Mhm.
than I had or did. But it's so much easier for us because the world sees us as binary, right? And when they're
Mhm.
seeing someone as non-binary, when I was in that in between world, I mean, I would get going into the women's room, for example, was violence. I mean, there's always a lot of violence against me, and people
Yeah.
just get so violent. Um, there's something about that level of violence that comes about gender, and I know that you've experienced that being a parent and the horrific things that, and I know now, surely by now you don't read the comments anymore, right?
Oh no, I read them.
Oh,
I read them. I read them, but that's because I'm so involved in so many different areas of advocacy with the political landscape and the anti-trans legislation, and it's so much of that is being pushed from the extreme religious right and everything, that I read it more as intel.
right.
I want to know what they're saying and what their new arguments are and the language they're using so that I can figure out how to answer that kind of language. Um, and I can read comment sections that don't pertain to my family directly, totally dispassionately. It's when it's about my family that becomes harder, but I still read them. Yeah, I'm a glutton for punishment, but
Yeah, I don't read them. I don't read them. And, I had this conversation the other day where I told a guy that I wasn't going to have this conversation where he started to say something like, what if I wanted to marry my dog? Right. Or what if you wanted
hmm,
to be a dog? That whole.
yeah, yeah. But see, um, that's again where I want to know what they're saying so that I can have that response ready to go. And sometimes it
How
actually
do you
has been
respond to that?
really sometimes, well, just once that it can be heartening when you see other people jump in and start explaining, because 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 6 years ago, that didn't
That was
happen.
not
And
happening.
now people dive in, they're like, no, we're not putting up with this, we're going to educate. And I love that. That's another reason I want to see it happen.
Yeah.
um I the whole dog thing, like when we're an embryo fetus developing, we don't have the genetic potential to be a dog, but we do have the genetic potential to be either male or female or somewhere in between. And we're still learning so much about chromosomes and hormones and effects of things on the body. And we're learning about the brain. And yeah, maybe we don't know the exact science behind gender or sexuality yet, but we also still haven't been to the deepest parts of the ocean. And how many years have we been sailing the great seas? Science evolves. Science is never, any scientist will tell you science is never 100% resolved. They keep questioning. You're only, you prove that you're not interested in science if you ever say something is 100% absolute. So, for me, that's the easiest thing. We have the genetic potential to be either. A lot of the things that come with gender, like the rules and expressions, are man-made ideas. Look at the different cultures. Look at how pink and blue switched because of marketing 100 years ago. Like it's clearly made up gobbledygook, and
Yeah.
um, don't invest so much in it,
Right.
and let other people be. Like, your gender is not going to affect another person's life.
Right.
Avery using they them pronouns is literally not going to affect anyone's life.
Right.
Get over it.
Yeah. And that's why I kind of just like, I'm not going to have that conversation with you. Like, I'm mostly just like, we're not going to go there. You're going to, if you, and the last person that said that to me was like, well, I mean, that person would be mentally ill. What if people think that you're mentally ill? And I'm like, well, that's fine. You can think I'm mentally ill. I don't care. I said, what I
Yeah.
care about is keeping your violence away from me. You can think
Mm.
whatever you want to think. I don't care. I don't have any issue about that. Keep your violence away from me and away from my children. And then I'm fine with you. I don't care. I don't have a
Yeah.
problem with that. But keep your violence and your thoughts about me needing to kill myself or all the, that's their favorite phrase is that we should kill ourselves. Keep it away
That's
from me.
powerful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm just like, I'm not gonna have those conversations. I just am telling you, keep your, because to me, that's a violent communication, right? And you're
Yeah.
telling me you're equating me to a dog, or then that's a violent communication. It's like
Hmm.
I'm not gonna I'm not interested in having that conversation. We're gonna have nonviolent communication, or we're just not gonna talk. So
Yeah.
that's how I generally answer those questions. So
Well, good for you.
yeah, well,
I like that.
yeah, most of the people I talk to are really, I find, and I say this to everybody, I've been out forever, and
Hmm.
99.9% of the time, I have people just lovely. People are just like interested and curious. Sometimes they ask me inappropriate questions,
Hmm.
but most of the time, they're pretty on point. Most people are just like curious and interested, and then, they always come up with when I do my talk, I had a friend with me once, when I was giving a speech. You probably have this happen to you. And afterwards, I talked to this huge audience, and then afterwards, everybody comes up to me and wants to tell me that they have a gay. Like, I have a gay.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
My friend was like, because I have never called it that. I have a gay.
Hmm.
She was like, do you always get that I have a gay conversation? I was like, what are you talking about? It's like everybody
Yeah.
coming up, my uncle's gay. I have a trans nephew. They just want to tell you, which is sweet, but it's
Right.
interesting.
Or like a gay. I know a trans.
Right.
Like, oh, bless you. Bless your heart.
And then we're gentle with them and be like, you mean, a transgender person, a
Hmm.
person that is trans. I know a trans.
Yeah.
It's like when people say, are they transgendering? No.
Right.
I love that. So
Yeah.
just for our audience who doesn't, because I do have some listeners here, right, who have never had this conversation. So
Hmm.
people don't they don't transgender. They are transgender, and
Hmm.
they make a medical transition, sometimes a social transition, and those are different. And especially when it comes to
Hmm.
kids, we don't do medical, just so you all know. We're not cutting up our kids. we're not,
Yes.
we're not doing medical transitions until they're age of puberty and hitting puberty, right? I mean, we don't take a 4-year-old and be like, we're going to cut you out.
Yeah. No 4-year-olds have sex hormones in their bodies anyway. If they do, it's called precocious puberty, and they treat that to prevent them from going through puberty young. It's not a thing. And yes, we don't trans our kids either. I'm not transing Avery.
Right.
I'm not transing kids in school by going and talking to them.
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
aren't we blessed that, and interested? It's interesting to me, and you had this experience at 4, because I see it all the time. People need to wake up to how gendered things are socially. We don't even have to go to
Hmm.
a medical transition, but socially things are so gendered. I try to explain this when I speak. It's like when you get up and say, ladies and gentlemen, I'm wondering how you're not talking to me, right? I'm not included in that conversation. And that's how it is for little kids. It's always boys and girls, boys and girls, boys. We're going to line them up by boys and girls. We're going to separate them by
Hmm.
boys and girls. And then you got a little non-binary or trans kid sitting there going, not included in this conversation.
Yeah. Just this morning, Avery said, "Hey guys, gals, and non-binary pals," and Tom just died laughing. Like, what? It's like, you have to be inclusive. So yeah, we're still having those conversations here too. Um, but yeah, some of the gendering things, like that was how we first saw. And again, hindsight's 2020. When Avery told us, I'm a girl at 4, but at 3 we were seeing these behavior things, like there were 2 boys, 10 girls in their preschool class, and the 2 girls wore necklaces, and Avery was dying to get a good behavior reward and win this little bracelet. And then later, when we were in a store, they saw like the boys rack of jewelry that was leather and spikes and a shark tooth, and was like, boys can wear necklaces. We're like, yeah, I want that one, and wanted a shark tooth necklace. And later we look back and we're like, oh, the world had said girls wear jewelry, boys don't. Avery desperately wanted some jewelry that was going to be seen as acceptable, and finally could put it on. And it was like all of these little moments where they were seeing the rules and they were trying to figure out, how can I work my way into that without getting in trouble?
Right.
And no kid should have to feel that way. No kid should have to be afraid at 3 and 4 of expressing who they are.
Yeah.
and we're punishing and shaming kids for it,
Constantly.
for things that adults have made up, and it's
Right.
just, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking. It's so silly. And
Yeah.
thank you for doing all your part to make that huge difference. And I know that I mean, we didn't talk about this a lot, but I know that your work involves a lot of the anti-trans legislation and combating that and supporting kids and making sure they're safe in our bathrooms and all the things. So I certainly appreciate
Yeah.
all the work that you do.
Well, thank you. Yes, for the last year or so, I've been working with the National Education Association to help teachers understand how to support families with young trans kids, and how to support a child whose parents aren't ready to support them, who needs that safe place at school and someone to talk to. And I'm really excited about that, because we do have so many kids who just need to be affirmed somewhere. And right now we have so many people attacking school boards and teachers with critical race theory and the gender confusion, that they're tying these things together, and it's going to be ugly. But also, 2021 has been the worst year for anti-trans legislation, and so many, like half of the anti-LGBT bills were focused on trans kids around
Yeah.
sports and medical care. And because they had some wins, we know that this next year is going to be even uglier. And I work with families in a lot of those states to figure out how to tell your story, how to go and testify, and keep your kids' safety in mind while you're doing it.
Right.
Because that's a scary thing too. You essentially put a target on yourself and out your child by trying to stand up for them. So yes, calling all allies who are out there listening. The legislative stuff is going to come up again, and trans families, kids, adults are scared to put themselves on the line to fight back against it. We need allies coming out saying, I support the trans community. You should not be attacking people for who they are. Please don't pass these laws. They are regressive. They are bigoted. This is not where our society needs to go. So please, please, please come out and be super vocal.
Yeah, and especially that we've got people who are elected to office. These are people who are serving our country, elected to office, telling our children they should go kill themselves.
Yes.
I mean, these
Yeah.
are legislators. These are people.
And they're doing it in such a cruel way. They're literally trying to erase trans people from existence. Out of most of the laws that were proposed this year, like fewer than 10 of them actually said the word transgender in them. Instead, they're talking about biological sex and biological males invading private girls' spaces and that kind of thing. And even during debates, someone will say, are you trying to hurt transgender kids? This is about biological sex. And then someone will say, you as a cisgender woman, and the person will reply, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means. I'm a woman. I'm just a natural woman. I don't need to have any other word to describe myself. You're like, but you're a cisgender and you're hurting transgender people. I don't know what these words are. And they are literally trying to not say the word out loud. They don't even want to recognize the existence and the validity of trans people and their experiences. And that is what's so horrifying to me. Like, you can just come out and say, I don't like trans people. I don't understand you. You gross me out. You confuse me. You make me uncomfortable, or whatever. But they won't even say the words. That's where we are right now.
Wow. Yeah. So I feel like we've regressed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now I've been in this movement for 35 years, so I know that it's always one step forward, two steps back, one step forward, two steps back. So that's kind of how we go. So I'm going to keep the faith. And I appreciate, and I want to reiterate that we need all the allies that we can get right now. So for all you listeners, if you're willing to put your foot in it, we need you for sure. Anything else you want to say to our folks before you go? And where can we find you and all the things?
Sure. You can find me online. Facebook is, as much as Facebook. It's still the place that I can have easier conversations with people. So I'm on Facebook. I do have a public profile page, something like Debi Jackson Advocate. I don't post there as often because of the way algorithms work. You don't see professional profile business pages as much as a personal one. You can find me as just Debi Jackson on Facebook as well, and send me a note so that I know who you are, where you came from, and then I'll accept you as a friend. And Debi is spelled Debi. I'm on Twitter. I'm not as active there. I'm trying to get better about it. I did a lot of tweeting for Equality Texas this year, but it still can be such an anti-trans dumpster fire. I don't go there a lot. But you can always send me messages there too. And on that, I'm _Debi Jackson. So yeah, just come find me and hang out, and let's be friends. And all of my posts are public anyway. So even if you don't send a friend request to my personal page, you can click follow and you'll still see everything since they're public. Pretty much everything that I do is about trans advocacy, just trying to raise awareness and educate folks.
Well, I sure appreciate that. They can't erase us. That's the good news.
They can't, especially with more people coming out as non-binary. Like you can't pretend you don't know someone's trans if they're asking you to use they them pronouns or sie them there, like it's right in your face, and I love it.
Yeah, me too. So thank you again, my friend. I just can't tell you how much I appreciate your work. I use that quote all the time by Anais Nin that says, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in the bud became more painful than the risk it took to blossom. And I always think about trans people inside of that, but you and I have this gorgeous experience of watching our trans kids blossom. And I assert that our kids and this experience has them blossom into a flower that doesn't even exist. It's like they are their own flower. And it's delightful. So I sure appreciate having another parent on that journey with me and all the things that you bring.
Yeah, thank you. I think our kids are beautiful and blossoming into something, but also they're blossoming into something new to teach us. Yeah. And as adults, we need to say and be okay with not having all the answers, and that we can actually learn from children.
100%. Perfect. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks for listening to the Gender Reveal Party podcast. I hope you loved it. And if you did, would you take a second and go do all the things like subscribe, rate, review, tell all your friends. Apparently, if you do that, the podcast platforms are more likely to share it. And if you think these stories are important, please take 3 minutes to just go do that. I'd really appreciate it. Also, I'd love to connect with you on social. On Instagram and Facebook, I'm at the Gender Reveal Party. And on Twitter, I'm at PryorJ. It's a real joy and privilege to bring you this podcast. Come back soon. Love you, bye.